Hello and welcome to the DPC Show. My name is Dan Offen, aka Mr. Big Jams, and in this show I'm going to be taking you through all 6 of the DPC regions for the DPC Season 2, aided by 6 of the world's top analysts who are all specialising in each of their individual regions. So this is very much the show if you want to stay on top of everything going on in the DPC. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Daniel Offen, and that's spelled Daniel and O-F-F-E-N. And if you'd like to financially support me for creating this show, you can find a link to my Patreon in the episode description. We, however, are going to be moting on straight away to Europe, where Peksu is going to be taking us through goings on there. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what I suppose you see as the first big match of the European DPC this week.
I think it would have maybe been my highlight of the week was probably Secret versus Nigma. I felt like that was I felt like Nigma, if you think about that series, I think Nigma, I mean, there was OG and Liquid and Alliance playing as well, but I think Secret Nigma was the most interesting one because I felt like I was really excited to see LDW, how he's going to perform in Nigma. Because I felt like Nigma is still a good team, but something weren't clicking with Wiha. So I feel like this LDW was a really interesting pickup, and I felt like I already looked at it like this before they invited him, that I was like, maybe they're going to get Sumail or something like that, and I wasn't sure how is that going to work for that team, but I think LDW, only from this one series so far, it seems like a really good fit, because I feel like LDW is this he can play very non-greedy way, but he can also play greedy, so it's going to fit well in the way that Miracle, I think, likes to play. So I think that's like that's why it was interesting to see me how they're gonna perform against Secret, and they did really good. So that's like that was probably the biggest how to say match for me to watch, and I was really positively surprised how well Nigma played in that series. Maybe Secret was also not on their best form or whatever. They had also some first games on Venom Jungle. Maybe it didn't work out the way they wanted to, but still like good show from Nigma. So that series was probably my favorite series to watch in that week.
It's good to hear. Would you describe it as a Secret loss or an Nigma win? Do you think Nigma did very well, or was Secret underperforming perhaps?
I would say I think the both games were kind of close in a way. So I don't think it was in either team like. I think Secret played fine, but I don't know if it was like their best form. But it's whatever. It's first series of the DPC league or like this season, so it's some stuff happens. But at the same time, I think Nigma played really well. I think Miracle on mid lane. I think both games he was solo killing Nisha, and I have considered Nisha to be probably the best mid laner on EU for like a year now. Like just considering how stable he has been on like results and stuff. So Miracle just showing that all Miracle stuff that he can still own really hard on mid as well. That was probably my biggest thing about that matchup. So I think Nigma was more. I think Nigma played better. I don't think Secret played bad, but I just think Nigma played really good. Like they had some really good team fight execution. I think there was like this, for example, that one mind control making that 4-man vacuum into stun from Miracle. That was just really beautiful to watch. So I think Nigma was like. I think they just played really well, and I think Secret didn't play poorly, but I just think Nigma outperformed them. That's how I felt about that series.
Great to hear. I wanted to ask you briefly, you mentioned and alluded to the jungle Veno from Puppey. Was that good? Is that something we're ever going to see again, or is it a bit of a weird flash in the pan?
I've seen it in pubs a few times. People go this dummy build, like what Puppey did as well, but I wouldn't say it was like necessary. Like if you look at the game, they had like a 3-4k lead at like a little bit of after 10 minutes, so they had a good start going on, but they just it came down to fights, and it was not the easiest game for them to play on later on. It was still against like this really farm Juggernaut who had a really free lane, so it was not their easiest time for Secret fighting that. But I would say that Puppey is this very like he has these ideas that may not look the best, but always, but like, and it's I wouldn't say not many teams will be able to make this work, but I think there are some teams like Secret, for example, can make it work. I think Nigma was just playing that game really well, so it didn't look that good, but I still saw the idea behind it that it can work out because of this dome. And some people have been even going for the Dominator too, like, and you have these 2 ancient creeps. Puppy didn't do it, but it might become a thing that later on that someone will do it, and you can do this really fast push lineup, maybe perhaps with it. You have like 2 ancient creeps with like these big auras, for example, the golem, which gives you max HP and stuff. So there's like a lot of these ideas behind it. I can see it work maybe in future, but I'm sure it's gonna be more like it's not gonna be very common. I would say I think it's gonna be picked here and there, but it's not gonna be seen very often. Still, that's how I feel about it.
Good to hear. I think it's always good to see new stuff. Let's
Yeah.
move on to Braim's week. They're kind of the new boys in the division. They lost
Yeah.
2-0 to OG, and I want to go into OG's new
Mm-hmm.
lineup, or new old lineup, I suppose, and then beat Tundra 2-0. A lot of people have Braim coming dead last in the division when you kind of ask a lot of analysts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that, or do you think they showed a lot this week to say that they might stay up?
I think before like the league started, I would have probably guessed that they're gonna be fighting for the last spot with Masters as well, Calibre Masters. But after the games against Hunter, they looked really solid. I think they have a good idea how they draft. I think Wish is a player that have been playing for a long time, but he has not really stepped up that much yet. But I think the current patch and how he likes to play, what heroes he likes to play, I think it really benefits him as a player, because there's no like all these Necrobook changes really, I think, hurt his way of playing. He likes to play these TAs and Tinkers and stuff like that. So he has a lot of these like cheesy picks. I feel like that Braim can work a lot on and around. So that's something that I see from Braim, and I think they really did surprise me against Tundra. I think Tundra maybe also didn't perform the best in that series, but I still think Braim played well. So I think it's gonna be tough to see. I think the Braim has already looked like better than I expected from them before. So even against OG, the game one, I think they played good until like 50 minutes. Then OG kind of just ran over them. But they have these good like signs how they play. So they're not like they do some good stuff in the games. Like they have some good laning stages and stuff like that. But they just have to work on how can they get move their good laning stages into like better game after against like these better teams like these alliances, liquids, OGs, and so on.
Let's go into that better team then. They played first time OG. A lot of people are going to be very excited about the return of Anna,
Yeah.
2TI winner Anna, into the team. How do you think they looked? Obviously, it is against Braim, so it's a bit difficult to know, but from my knowledge of that series, they kind of steamrolled them a little bit. Would you agree
Yeah.
with that?
They had some fountain diving as well, which was like back to the old OG times, I guess. Yeah, I think they played good. I mean, like you said, it's Brave still, and it's not like the strongest team in the league, but they're still a not bad team or anything like that. So I would say that OG looked good, and it's still the first series of the DPC with this roster, so it's hard to say exactly. But I think they already showed good signs how like things are working. They already went a little bit on their old school drafting, like this Magnus Jog, which they like to do a lot in the past as well. So they have these. It's basically their old OG, just Saxa instead of Jarex, but Saxa is also a really amazing player. So I feel like they have all the tools to get good results in short time as well if they just keep going. So I think the gameplay and like how they played looked good. So it's next series they're gonna play against Alliance, so that should be I guess like the real test and see how they're gonna perform, because Alliance is still a good team, and I think they are the ones that we're gonna see at least like good game from OG or how it's gonna go. I think they're gonna be the real test. But I think OG overall looked really good against Brame, so nothing to say, nothing to take from there. I think it was kind of expected as well. I think Ana is probably the guy that they're gonna feel the most comfortable playing with any carry in the world. So every player in the team probably is gonna play better as well, just because of Ana as well is in that roster.
As you mentioned, this is very close to the kind of classic OG roster, the only substitution being Jarex to Saskia. In your estimation of those players, how do you think Saskia changes the way that classic OG roster plays? Is it a very different player to Jarex, for example?
I think Saxa is maybe a guy that is more of a like I have considered him as a stronger laner, like maybe than Jarex. I think Jarex does a lot of cool stuff outside of the like I'm not saying Jarex is a bad laner or anything. I think he's a good laner as well. But I think Saxa has, to me, as like he has showed up that he has some good stuff that he doesn't lane often. So that's something that I have noticed. I think Jarex does this like very cool plays. He has some good ideas. and he I think he has a lot of voice as well, that when if you listen to how they communicated in TIs and stuff, I think Jarak says a lot of stuff. So I think it's more about this like calls in the game and some like how he does things. But I think they're very close. I think in skill wise they're close to each other. I think I wouldn't say like this team is gonna fall on Saxa's performance. I think this team is very strong right now, and I think Saxa. I think when OG was in their slump or whatever, or before Anna, I think Saxa was probably one of the. I think he was playing the best in that team for some time at least. So I think it's gonna be. I think Saxa is gonna do well. I don't think there's gonna be anything weird from him in that roster. I think he is a good fit for that team as well. I think in terms of Jerax, I think they're pretty in the similar level. A little bit different players, but still like they can work around Saxa as well. I'm sure of it.
Great, it's good to hear. I wanted to go finally into the match between a team that you mentioned, Team Alliance, who are coming up for OG as well. Both those teams struggled a little bit at the major, and I think probably didn't put in the performances they would have expected. How do you think they looked in the first game back?
I think, yeah, I mean, Alliance, the game one, it looked pretty rough. And I think even game two, I think Liquid were kind of looking to take that game. But then there were some fights, and Nico Baby started to get really farmed on that Sven. And then later on, yeah, it like Alliance kind of just bounced back. It was maybe the Liquid thing that they do well on their lanes, but then they're not able to always close out their games. I mean, they've gotten way better at it, but I still think they have some issues sometimes on those scenarios. And then yeah, Alliance just kind of took that game, like third game as well. Nico Baby kind of playing on his comfort heroes, Sven and Morph. I mean, Sven maybe not so much, but Morphling still like really comfortable hero. He went 17-0 in that game and didn't die once. So yeah, I think Alliance bounced back. This was a pretty important series, I think, for both teams, because these are maybe in the paper. If you look at four now, I think they're the two teams that are gonna fight for that fourth slot. Because I really feel like Nigma and OG are gonna be stronger this season than the last season. I really feel like that, and Secret is probably still gonna be in the top four as well. So I think Alliance and Liquid, they're gonna this win for Alliance is a really big start for the league, because yeah, it's basically like what I said. I think it's gonna be the fourth and fifth placement match most likely, and that's why Alliance taking that victory is very big for them, and obviously for Liquid it's not so good, but yeah. They always had Alliance and Liquid. They have always had this really close series, and each team they have this really little rivalry going on with Nico Baby and the Alliance, because Baby, I think he was meant to join Alliance a long time ago. Then they ended up going with Koikwa. So there's like these little things, I think, in that team between those teams. I don't think it's like that major, but I still think there is something in between those. So anytime they're playing against each other, there is like this little like smack talk and stuff like that. So yeah, so I think Alliance taking that win is really big for them, and Liquid obviously it's still the first series of the season, so can't say much yet, but important victory overall for Alliance in that series.
He's a player who likes a rivalry as well, Nico Baby, I think.
Yeah.
He revels in having someone to be an enemy with. Let's move on then to next week. We've got some big games coming up for the EU division. We're kicking off April 20th with Secret versus Smashers, then that big game of Alliance versus OG you mentioned. Nigma versus Liquid on April 21st, and on April 24th we've got Secret versus Tundra and Alliance versus Nigma. What would be your highlight from next week if people can only catch a couple of games?
I think Alliance OG should be a good one. I think Nigma Liquid and Alliance Nigma. I think Secret games are gonna be good as well, but I think at least I'm the most thrilled about seeing this Alliance OG, because I feel like OG looked good against Brain, but I also think Alliance have been looking pretty good. I think they flopped or like they didn't really perform the way they have been looking on the major, but I still think like against OG in the past, Alliance have played pretty well. So now OG is gonna have their real test with Anna. So that should be my at least highlight of the week. I think Nigma Liquid is gonna be also good. I think Liquid has had some good results against Nigma in the past as well, and they have been close series against each other. But now Nigma with his LDW big up and winning 2-0 against Secret is they're looking strong as well. So those two series are probably my favorite series of that week.
Certainly for me as well. Okay, great. We'll leave it there then. Thanks so much for coming on this week, and I'll see you next week.
Yep.
A huge thanks to Peksu for taking us through Europe. Peksu is replacing T Gamner for this time. I'm very excited to have him on board. Obviously, T was fantastic, but Peksu is a brilliant player and a really nice guy, and I'm delighted to have him on board. He can be followed on Twitter. Of course he can, because who can't be followed on Twitter these days? At peksudota.com, not .com at all, just Peksudota. And we, however, are going to be moving on straight away to Southeast Asia, where the ever-amazing Danog is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to start, talk me through, I suppose, what you see as the top match of this week in the Southeast Asian DPC.
The past week was pretty interesting in some ways, but honestly, not that much in others, because it was a lot of like the top teams going up against the bottom of the barrel, at least in my opinion, in this upper division, right? Like probably the closest one across the board would have been Omega taking on T1. That was, the old Adroit roster, at least the majority of them, coming up against the Cuckoo stack. It was Cuckoo's big return, and unfortunately for T1 fans, they weren't able to take the chocolates this time, and honestly, he felt pretty damn outclassed all throughout that series. Even though it was only a 2-1 in Omega's favor, those victories were like standout victories, absolute stompings.
So Omega have come through from the lower division. Are they a different team to what we saw last thing, or is it the same team just performing well?
I think they've just been performing pretty damn well, but they also had a couple of small little adjustments there. A couple of their players, Bok and Boomy, have been poached by TNC. So TNC wanted to have that full Filipino roster. They no longer are having KP and Febby with their lineups. And I think the reasoning that they said was that during their post-game analysis and just talking about Dota in general, they felt like they could have slightly more in-depth and intricate conversations if they were in their native Tagalog language, as opposed to trying to make it work with English. So now they're playing with a few new players, which is always exciting to see. We've got Sam H as well as Shanks. Sam H, I'm sure if you've been following the Dota scene for quite a while, he's a name that probably rings a bell for you. Shanks, though, he's getting his big opportunity, and he's making it work for them so far because they're 2 series up after the first week.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I mean, a victory against Little Gun and a victory against T1. But a lot of people won't have watched Omega yet if they've not had a chance to tune in this week, because they wouldn't have watched Low Division necessarily. So talk me through what makes this team interesting and exciting. What sort of things are they picking? What sort of things are they playing?
I mean, it's just exciting Filipino Dota, right? Like that's the big thing for mine. I mean, the big surprise for me was in that series against T1. They're able to really be quite good with their drafting. A big problem that I had with Adroit, which then became Omega, was that they kind of went into a lot of these games with just wanting to draft on feeling as opposed to having a set strategy in mind. But there's some of that still there. They are a little reactionary with a lot of their stuff, but it is much more planned. The reactionary stuff that I'm talking about is like in game 1 of their series against T1, they picked a carry sniper with their last pick overall, and it was a really good response because T1 didn't actually have anything that could catch it at all. Like it was all like super passive things that kind of just want to walk up to objectives and hopefully take them. But, Sniper's just like, no, that's not going to happen. And, Tino did fantastically on it. So I'm really liking that they've got that level of versatility, but it's really going to be put to the test in their first game of next week, which is going to be up against TNC. So a full Filipino brawl, which is always exciting.
Yes, and that's certainly a big one to come on. And let's talk about a little bit about TNC, who beat Execration 2-0. TNC were a little bit of a disappointment in Season 1. I think we felt as we started they could have been one of the top teams. They didn't manage to end up qualifying for the major. Is the first week an exciting time for them, or is it still too early to tell?
I wouldn't say it's too early to tell. I mean, I feel like having all of the roster there in person is such a big difference. Everyone in the team house previously, Febby was in Korea, KP was in Sydney. So A, they're playing on ping, B, they're not there to have those in-depth discussions afterwards, whereas they're all in one place right now. It seems like they're fitting in pretty well. They're making like little TikToks together, so they're having fun. And I mean, they went 2-0 against Execration, which is always exciting. And even in some third-party stuffs, it was on the Asia Pacific Predator League. They beat Boom. It was only a best of 1 in the lower bracket final. Yeah, And then in the upper bracket final, they ended up 2-0ing Neon as well, who came 5th, 6th. So definitely some good results. I don't think they've dropped a single game so far on this patch, at least in an official.
Excellent. Lots to look forward to there then. I wanted to go into Lil Gun as well, who this are the first 2 games in the upper division. They lost both of them, but they did pick up 1 game against Omega, which we talked about. Lil Gun are interesting because they're the only team, I believe, in the upper division of any DPC who have no connections to any other players. Someone released that 7 Degrees app for Dota.
Yeah, I saw that.
No connections to
they got nothing.
anyone. Which is interesting. So what can we expect to see from Little Gun? Is this going to be a really tough season for them, or do you think they have they shown any potential?
They have shown potential, but it is going to be tough for them because they just go cheese, cheese, cheese over and over again. Like, they will pick your Lycans, but it's not good anymore. They'll pick your Lone Druid. It's kind of iffy. They'll pick your Huskar, which is quite nice. But what a lot of teams are doing is they let them pick the Huskar, but they just pick these lineups that are fantastic against it. You know, they go the Ursa. They ban out a lot of their supports that enable the Huskar to actually work. You know, the Oracle, the Omni Knight, things like that. So it's something that they're going to have a little bit of a challenge with. I think they've got some really good mechanically skilled players. I think Sanctity is a little bit of a breakout star if he does get his chance. But, it might be a little bit rough for them. I've got them kind of sitting, honestly, dead last at the end of this season. But up towards the top, it is a lot more even. I've got a group of 5, and then a group of 2, and then Little Gun sitting at the bottom.
Okay. Let's go into, finally, Boom Esports, who ended up taking another game against Execration 2-1. I think from the first season, they were a team that we had expected to do reasonably well, and they didn't end up quite performing to the top of their level, but I think that's true of a number of teams in Southeast Asia. How did they look in their first showing of this season?
Well, the thing that Boom fans are going to be really happy about is that, you've got Dreamer Cell back. Drew's now playing in the lower division, and it always felt like in Season 1, it was either Makoto carries the game or they're going to lose. And occasionally FBZ would do it from the off lane, but it never felt like Drew was going to be that person. Dreamer Cell can be that person for this team. He did it in the series against Execration, and then in even the series against Little Gun, they just picked position 1 IO, and they did it 2 games in a row, and Little Gun had no response to it. I mean, you could just ban it, but it's just that little extra string to their bow. I feel like Dreamer Cell was part of that long string of reasonably good success. I mean, they almost never won anything, but they were always like 2nd or 3rd place at the absolute minimum. And realistically, 2nd place is all you need to be able to put in a really good showing at the major. It gets you automatically to that group stage, and we saw what Neon were able to do when they got that opportunity.
Certainly. Neon as well. I wanted to briefly go into them. I know they didn't play this week. We've got 2 teams.
Not yet, yeah.
This week, Fnatic and Neon, they're coming up next week. I guess we can do a touch of a preview on them then. Neon will have their offlaner back, and Fnatic are the same as last season.
No, Fnatic have changed. So Fnatic kicked Masaros. So I don't think he was the reason that they did badly at the major. So now they've got In Chuan, who was previously playing in the lower division, not the Chinese Chuan, the old IG Chuan, a Malaysian version, but he's actually a mid laner. And so they've gotten him for the offlane, which I thought was really odd because, I mean, you just had Death put in an amazing showing for Neon at the major, playing position 3, doing a body of work, but just hasn't been realized, hasn't been picked up, and he's not even playing in the lower division. So I'm not sure what's going on there with a lot of these teams, but I feel like that would have been the premium pickup for them to be able to have. And then, with Neon, they've got Natsumi back in that carry role. Skim's going to move back to 3. And, who knows how it's going to go. I feel like it was, I don't want to say it was a flash in the pan moment for Neon, but all the stars really aligned well for them. And I think I saw from like a tweet that Knoxville put out, they've got like a 75% chance of being able to make it to TI just based off of their current points alone. But yeah, you can't rest on your laurels. It's only the top 12 that make it through. And we speak about Masaros being kicked from Fnatic. You also had Jackie kicked from T1 for 23 Savage. And well, that means that the old Motivate Trust roster is back together in the lower division, and they are stomping absolutely everyone. So if I'm any of these upper division teams, I think you need to be putting everything into making sure that you've got enough points to be part of that top 12, because I'm calling it now, when those regional qualifiers happen, I think Motivate Trust are going to be the Southeast Asian representative that makes it through with that last chance.
Yes, so I was going to briefly go into the lower division. So we had Motivate Trust winning their match 2-0 against Signal. We also had the
Southfield Esports. Yeah, they're 3-0, right? Like 3 series. Dominant. Absolutely dominant. That's the old Vice lineup, but they've just changed around. They don't play with Palos anymore. Now he's playing on Execration, and you've actually got a Bart coming in and playing, and they're pretty good. There's lots of good vibes. They're really strong coming together. Granted, the level of opposition isn't quite the level that they were experiencing in Season 1's upper division, but still, scary prospect for sure.
Yeah, given the quality of the rosters in the lower division here, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff to come out of that, as well as upper division going forwards. Let's go into what we can expect to see next week. Hopefully, some bigger games next week as Fnatic and Neon return on the 21st. We've got Omega versus TNC, Execration versus Fnatic, 22nd, Boom versus OB Neon, and 24th, TNC versus Neon and Lilgun versus T1. A lot of big games there. TNC versus Neon jumps out, but also the Fnatic game and the TNC game will be your pick for the week.
I mean, honestly, the story for mine is like this is the make or break week for both TNC and Neon, to be honest. Like Neon, they're playing their first 2 games against, I mean, Boom and TNC are hard opponents, and we've seen from Omega, they're 2-0 at the moment. You know, one was against Little Gun, sure, but the other was against T1, who, you know, they made it all the way to the major wildcard. So we'll see what they're able to do, but you definitely want to get at least one win on the board if you're both of those teams. And, you know, it's a lot of these games where it's not only just the win for yourself, but taking a win away from someone else, because I feel like this is the season where we're going to be coming down to even potentially like a 3-way tiebreaker right at the end of it, just to see who places where.
Well, big matches all round and really kicking off next week, so be sure to catch all of those. Thanks so much for joining me, Danog, and I'll see you next week. Thank you to Danog for taking us through Southeast Asia. Danog can be followed on Twitter at Danog, and he's casting a lot of lower division Southeast Asian Dota at the moment. He's a brilliant talent, and I'm delighted to continually have him on board. We, however, are going to be moving on straight away to Eastern Europe, where Mo Farah is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through, I suppose, what you see as the biggest matches of this week's Eastern European DPC.
There were 3 pretty big games this week, actually, which is quite funny considering in Season 1, we didn't get any of the top 4 matching up against each other for, I think, like the first 2 weeks or something ridiculous. And then in the first week of this season, there's been 3 games out of the 5 that have all been the top 4 playing against each other. Massive, massive week for Team Spirit, who are still riding the high from the end of last season, it seems. They've come into this new patch. They're playing really well. They're playing very strong. They seem to have a good idea of how they want to play the game. And not only did they beat Na'Vi and AS Monaco Gambit, 2 of the teams in the top 4, but they beat them without dropping a game. And I am not joking when I'm telling everybody that it was pretty convincing as well. Like both their games against Na'Vi, both the games against AS Monaco Gambit were relatively clean. And so I think, especially after these 2 wins this week, unless they massively mess things up moving forward, I would expect to see them at the major now. Pretty, not comfortably, but it's, you know,
looking good.
It's looking really good.
Where would you say the new strength is coming from for that team? Because they did improve a lot at the end of the last DPC. I think when they added Miroslav replacing someone else with an M at the beginning of the name. I can't remember who it was he replaced.
Can't remember who it was though either, I'll be honest.
But yes, is it coming from this new player, or because they have a young mid, they have a young carry? Are they those people just improving as well?
I think he is playing well. I think he's playing much better than he's playing a lot more consistent than he was last season. I think is a better way of putting it, because when he first came into that team, I was still a little bit unsure. Like he was good most of the time, but he was still having silly moments. So far in these 4 games that they've played, they've been really, really hot. And I think him in particular, he's been really good. I think Tokyo looks much better than he did last season as well. He had that kind of period last season where he was making silly mistakes, sometimes diving a little bit too far, having these plays that were really affecting the outcome of games. And he seems to have ironed that out quite well. And so without these, silly misplays and things that they seem to be going for last season, it's been real good. If you're a Spirit fan, then, there's only things to be looking forward to here, I think, this season.
And what sort of things have they been picking in those wins? What's been the crux of the wins?
It's been different as well, which is interesting, right? I mean, obviously, this Grimstroke is something that every team has been playing, right? Everybody is aware of. I think ever since the Shard got added to the game, people have recognized how strong that hero can be. It got nerfed a little bit recently, but it's still very good. But it's been a bit of a mix of things. This Storm has been something that they seem to really like. But again, I think ever since the change to Bottle, and how much regen you're allowed to get in the mid lane now, heroes like Storm and like these Queen of Pains and things that can get through mana so quickly to farm and to also do damage to the enemy mid will benefit massively from that. So I think they seem to have a good read on the patch and what they need to do, but also I think their hero pools complement quite well what the patch asks for in particular as well. I want to talk about the other big four matchup this week as well. That is VP versus AS Monaco Gambit, which is the first game of CIS completely, which is insane because they're the two teams that represented the CIS region at the major, obviously because Na'Vi didn't make it. And AS Monaco Gambit picked Wisp Tusk as their opening two, all three games. They won game two, but unfortunately lost the two others. VP a little bit not as clean as last season.
Clinical.
Yeah, definitely not as clinical, but they did enough. And I think when you've been to this major, maybe they didn't do as well as they were hoping. I think they finished, what was it, top 8, I think it was, which isn't awful for them, but especially for like a first LAN for the team, right? But not as well as they would have liked. To come in and then to try and reset mentally ready for season 2 must be quite difficult, especially when you're playing another top team straight away. So they'll be happy that they got the win, but there's lots to work on with their performance still.
Yeah, do they perhaps just look a little shaky? Because I know that major result would have been a big disappointment for them. I don't think there is necessarily going to shake their confidence in the strength of the team, but I think it probably made them step back a little bit and reconsider. Did you see kind of elements of that in their play?
I think for me it looks more like they hadn't practiced a huge amount, which would be normal. I think for a team that has just come back from a major competition, this is the problem with such small turnovers at the moment between events. That you feel like you finish the major and then all of a sudden the patch is out and then there's another DPC season starting in like a week, and they will have needed time to recover from the major, and it takes time to reset from that mentally. So it wouldn't surprise me if they'd only been scrimming for maybe a few days before the DPC started, which it might be something similar for AS Monaco Gambit, but I think both teams they were nowhere near their best, I would say. Like, they weren't awful, that's not what I'm saying, but I think there's definitely there's definitely a lot more to come from both of them. But I mean, AS Monaco Gambit will be really disappointed after losing to VP and Team Spirit, two of the two other teams in this top 4 that they've lost to both of them. I mean, it now puts a lot of pressure on their other series, and especially the series against Na'Vi, to see who can really be battling for those major positions.
Let's go into, you mentioned Team Spirit beating Na'Vi, which is obviously a big result for them. Na'Vi created quite a lot of controversy with their new addition of Ramses over General. Was that a poor bedding in for him? Did he look all right? How's that decision currently faring?
It's difficult to know after one series, because I feel like sometimes we read too much into one series. Maybe the team just has a bad day, and all of a sudden they win the rest of their series and they go 6-1. And all of a sudden we look stupid after looking at them poorly for 1 week. But I will say they looked almost like a little bit lost at times. You could tell they weren't quite... It felt like they were a little bit not confident almost. They hadn't... There was one, I think it was game 1, Ramses and Roger in the off lane didn't look like they were quite in tandem with each other almost, which is, a bit of a shame. But that's to be expected, I think, when someone new comes into the team, especially, more recently, at least announced more recently as well. So hopefully for Na'Vi, things will get better moving forward. They've lost the series. Don't overthink it too much. But next week, they have a massive series against AS Monaco Gambit to look forward to. And they can't be worrying about what's already happened. They need to look forward now.
Yeah, certainly. Let's go into the other the two new boys of the division, so PuckChamp and Windstrike, teams that most people may not be aware of very well because none of them have any well-known players. How do you think those ended up looking this week?
They both looked okay. I don't think either of them looked like they were, completely outclassed. I mean, obviously, Windstrike won their series up against Extremum. I like both these teams. I mean, if you're going to know anybody from Windstrike, especially, it's probably Cheshire Cat, maybe Yamich as well. But there was a really interesting point I was listening to the DPC guys say from the talent. They were saying, like, when you play against, like, in these lower divisions, it was almost kind of like, not like from the streets kind of stuff, right? But like you almost have to fight for it first, and then you come into the upper division afterwards, and you understand how difficult of a slog it's been almost, right? Because like Hellraisers, this team with like Resolution and stuff, didn't even make it to the upper division, and they were probably the big favourites going into it. So you know they have had to work hard to where they've needed to get to already, and if you compare them to the teams that went down last season, I would say both of them already look like they will put up more of a fight than No Techies did, for example.
Yeah.
So I think this season, the bottom four should be a lot more competitive, I hope, which is quite nice. Obviously, PuckChamp will be disappointed. They lost their first series 2-1 to Unique. But I don't think Unique are a bad team at all either. But it does feel very similar to last season in the sense that it's split up into 2 fours. You know, with this like VP Na'Vi, AS Monaco, Gambit, Spirit, and in the bottom 4 we have Extremum, PuckChamp, Windstrike, and Team Unique. So if any of these other 4 teams push into the top 4, I will be very surprised. But after the AS Monaco Gambit performances that we've seen in week 1, I think it is possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well we'll look forward to that. Let's look at what's happening in the lower division very briefly. Did you get a chance to watch much lower division this week?
Let me have a look at the games first quickly just to see. So I saw some of the Bait series, new season. Unfortunately, they've lost again.
Bait's re-qualified.
Yeah. Well, yeah, technically they re-qualified, I guess. The big one for me is obviously, again, we talked about it last season, being Hellraisers. Obviously, I think they are still going to be the big favourites coming into this season. Maybe, probably, I would say, along with Empire, I think, who got relegated last season. And both getting off to really good starts, both winning 2-0. I would be surprised if it's not those 2 that go up, but there's so much to play for still. I'm a little bit worried about this No Techies team again. Obviously, it's completely different to what it was before. It's still the solo stack, but it's completely changed. And again, they lose 2-0 to Namiga, and I am really worried for them because I don't see them being a team that is going to be pushing to go up, and I'm worried for them. They might end up just almost collapsing in a sense towards the end of the season. So fingers crossed they don't, but yeah, difficult to know.
Okay, let's look to what's coming up then next week. We've got a less of a barnstorming week in Eastern Europe this week, but still lots of matches to look forward to. On April 22nd, we've got Na'Vi versus Extremium, Windstrike versus Unique, and VP versus PuckChamp on the 23rd. And on the 25th, Na'Vi versus ASA Monaco Gambit, and Windstrike versus Team Spirit. The pick there is probably the Na'Vi Gambit game, as you mentioned. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight?
I would say probably Na'Vi versus Extremum as well, because Extremum aren't a bad team. They lost last week, but I think Na'Vi, they need to get, if they're going to have a chance against AS Monaco Gambit, I think they need to get over this series from last week and make sure they put in a good performance in that one. Because if they don't, I can see that momentum going into the next game against AS Monaco Gambit 3 days later being a bit of an issue. So hopefully it irons itself out. But that Na'Vi versus AS Monaco Gambit series is huge for contentions for the major and things. Because if AS Monaco Gambit lose that game as well, they then go 0-3, and then you're thinking, do they even have a chance of going to the major now?
Yeah.
So
that'd be a tricky one.
Difficult, yeah.
Okay, well, look out for that one on the Sunday. But thanks so much for joining me this week, and I'll see you next week. Thank you to Mo Farah for taking us through Eastern Europe. Wonderful guy, and always good to have him on board. He can be followed at Mo Farah Dota on Twitter, and a brilliant guy to follow and be around. We are going to be moving on straight away, though, to China, where Kips is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through, I suppose, what you see is the biggest matches in this week, the first week of the Chinese Upper Division DPC.
Yeah. Well, we only had 3 matches in the upper division. Most of China, because of the 4 teams making it to the major and all of them going deep, plus the fact that the season was already longer because they had Chinese New Year in between. So the previous season went on for 2 weeks after the other regions had already closed off. They're giving them a bit of a break. So no real big name matches, at least not with 2 big names in it this week. We had SAG versus RNG, which is really just a matchup between the 2 teams that promoted from the last season, from the 2nd division. And then eHome versus RNG, which was, well, eHome barely squeaked by in the last season. So they got to see if they could actually beat one of the up-and-comers. It just about went. And then the biggest match means automatically it is Elephant versus eHome. With Elephant previously having had a very disappointing season. I mean, it's a super team, right? Everybody expected more from them. I think they expected more from themselves. They had a lot of drama. They had some wishy-washy results. And then before this season, they finally did it. They got ROTK in. And they got to fight for eHome here. The disciplinarian, exactly. Well, what does a team of superstars plus Red Panda, I guess, need? What does a hero truly need? Well, RTK standing behind your chair, judging you for slacking off, I think. And I know that he likes to keep it to just judging you, but this man is not afraid to yell at people. I've been at LAN, I've heard Vici. More specifically, I've heard ROTK after Vici lost. And he's an impressive man, and he sounds like he makes good points. I didn't understand any of it.
But it sounded like they were good. They were said with confidence. Let's talk about them briefly then. Beating eHome, obviously eHome won their other game against RNG, who I do think are a strong team. So I don't think eHome could be said to be slouches. But did Elephant look stronger? Were they more composed? How would you say they've changed this season with Aratiki's leadership there?
I was wondering if it was really going to be kicking in that fast already, or if he really had to change anything like gameplay-wise as well. But I think what we're really seeing here is that Elephant already knew how to play. They already knew what they wanted to do. They just needed a firm kick in the shins. So they absolutely demolished eHome, actually, which is what I was looking to see from them, because if Elephant actually wants to be a super team, then not only should you beat eHome, but you should beat eHome hard. And the first game was 100% a stomp. It was actually incredible to see, especially Yang on a Legion Commander go completely off. There were no breaks on that train. eHome could not get a word in edgewise. It was spectacular if you like to see teams just snowballing and diving.
This is eHome as well, with a Sylar who's going to be joining them for the whole of the DPC rather than just the end of it like last time. Has he improved the team at all? Because I didn't feel that Ajit was a weak player for them. How do you feel they look with Sylar?
I don't think that Ajit is a weak player necessarily, but I definitely do feel that he's not a carry. And that was where most of his shortcomings as a player lay, in that he couldn't decide between fighting and farming because his instinct was fighting instead of hitting creeps. And like Sylar's farm patterns look good, his numbers look good, but he doesn't look like he's on the top of his game anymore. And I think that was the objection that a lot of people had against, picking him up again. But it was eHome's weak spot. So really they traded in a player with known drawbacks for another player with known drawbacks. And they definitely look a little bit more like a stable, well-rounded lineup right now. It doesn't seem like they're ready to build on him just yet.
Great. Let's go into Royal Never Give Up, one of the 2 teams that have gone through. From that, more casual fans may only recognize Super, who is previous mid player, one of the best performing TI players of all time. Super, now playing 5. How did Royal Never Give Up look last season? What can we expect to see from them further in this season?
Yeah, so RNG had a little bit of a rusty start, you could say. They were winning, but they weren't exactly very convincing. And as the season furthered, they got a lot more tempo going just in general in the way they played. It was almost like they had to gain confidence or something, had to wake up. And especially the player that improved the most throughout that season, I feel, is God King, who has improved or impressed a lot of people previously with his interesting AM builds, a lot of different styles of playing carry. And he's switched off to a little bit more of a standard hero pool now, I feel, but he's become a lot more stable, and he's not, as Twitch Chat likes to call him, the God Feeder anymore.
What sort of
It's
things do
pretty good.
RNG tend to pick? Are they an interesting team to watch, or are they playing very standard Dota?
RNG are aggressive. I think that's been a theme throughout the different lineups that they've had, because RNG and a very, very different group of people have made it to ESL tournaments before as well. And I think their signature has always been aggression. They played one of the lineups that I really liked from this week versus eHome. Didn't quite get off the ground, but they played with a Necrophos on the off lane and really built their team around that stable pushing center of the team fight that Necrophos has, with a Storm and an Earth Spirit rolling around that. That was a fun game to watch.
I want to go into Super as well. How's he looking? Because Super's one of my favorite mid players back in the day. I mean, he was what I like to describe as a Dragon Knight mid player who just seemed to endlessly play Dragon Knight. Which to me, kind of like Farter in EU seems to signify that he do well, shifting to 5. Is he looking comfortable on the position yet, or is it still a bit rusty?
He does, yet I think one of the things that he has problems with, like most core players do when they switch to this position, is that he really has trouble making plays without items. And you see that a lot, that other support players know way better how to look up like the edges of the team fight to make sure they can still get spells in, and he has a tendency to over engage a little bit, which is very understandable. But I do think that it looks like they have some solid leadership behind the team, and I'm definitely ready to credit him for that.
I want to go into the low division now, which is where the majority of the matches was seen. I don't think we've got time to go through all of these. Are there any particular highlights that you'd pick out?
Highlights here, definitely. I mean, the real treat is going to come next week with the match that I have just casted.
Not allowed to talk about that yet.
No. I'll keep.
Still in the future. It's not happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet. No. So, but it involves Aster Ares versus one of the better teams, and in this case, the previous match that they played was versus LBZS, which happened this week. And LBZS, one of the two teams that dropped down from the upper division, where they didn't manage to really land any punches at all, which was a shame. They were really one of my favorites for coming in there. But if you look at how incredible the quality of play in the upper division was this season, they just didn't stand a chance. Favorite player there, Cathu, previously had a much funnier nickname. Do you know about that one?
No, I don't remember that one.
His name used to be Cat Feces.
Oh yes, of course, yeah. An odd one.
Yeah. Incredible Earth Spirit player, hyper aggressive, and in this series versus Aster Ares, he did end up getting punished for that. Aster Ares actually looking, unlike most teams that would promote up from, because this is an open qualifier team, by the way. Anyone who might not know, Aster Ares comes in as an open qualifier team, lost to Magma this week, unfortunately, which is the other team that came down from the up division.
But now a strong week.
Beat LBCS. Yeah. I mean, no. The other win happens next week.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
Or sorry, it's not a win, but the other strong performance.
Magma won 2 games this week against Ares and DS.
Oh yeah, that's what you're talking about. Yeah. So they beat both of the open qualifiers, that would be the expected result. Whereas LBZS beat Dragon Slayers and then lost versus Aster Ares, who had an incredible PA performance in game 1, a mag PA, if you want to believe that exists in these this day and age. Removing a Phantom Lancer from the game, actually. That was awesome. This was played before the shard was nerfed, and he didn't buy the shard, which gives the bouncing lance in the first game. And LBZS did not manage to take that one. And then in the third game, an incredible performance from an offlane Slardar from Aster Ares. They just snowballed that one out. And it was very dominant, high-tempo play, the kind you'd normally see from way more experienced teams than a team that just came out from the upper division. So I wonder who from Aster is coaching these guys, because they've looked stellar.
Excellent. Lots to look forward to there then. Let's move on to what's coming up in the next week. Again, just another 3-match game for the upper division. I'm not going to read out all the lower division ones. There's too many. We've got April 20th, Elephant versus SAG. eHome versus SAG on the 23rd. And on the 25th, Elephant versus RNG. So still none of the big teams in there, but interesting games nonetheless. What would be your pick from the week?
My pick for the week, it depends a little bit. If you want a close contest, you might want to watch eHome versus SAG. But if you're interested in seeing if the ROTK discipline holds up, the other two Elephant games, either of them, like I'd probably favor the RNG matchup slightly, but either of them could be good. And what we'll really be looking for is all right, Elephant has returned to form. They've shown their dominance, like completely pushed eHome to the side. And now it's like, are they going to start thinking they're cool again? Or is ROTK standing behind their chair and tapping his foot?
Great. One can hope.
That's what we want to see out of Elephant. Do they actually perform like a super team should this time around?
Great. Lots to look forward to then. Thanks so much for joining me this week, and I'll see you next week. Thank you to Kips for taking us through China. Kips is fantastic and will be followed on Twitter at Kipsol, and should be. And we're going to be following our noses and getting straight away to South America, where 1437 is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what I suppose you see as the biggest matches this week in the South American DPC.
Yeah, there were a few really good games because we had best of threes go all the way to 3-game series in upper division and lower division. I feel like this season has been more competitive in general because of season 1. Everyone has kind of understood what it takes to be there, how much practice you need, and maybe also like the financial support has also helped them out a little bit, motivated them a little bit more so they can focus more on their gameplay. There was 2 really good series that occurred. Thunder Predator versus Infamous, that's a big one. Thunder Predator, we know they played very well at the major, but then when it came to their match against Infamous, it looked really shaky. Like Infamous could have taken it. I think Thunder Predator, they used their experience to their advantage a bit and came out ahead because of that. But other than that, we might have seen an easy 2-0 there.
Infamous have made a few changes since the first season. I think it's just they replaced Mandy and Mr. Jeans. Am I correct in saying? How did they look this time?
So much better. I think this team is gonna make waves for sure. I think they're a much better team this time around. Just a second, sorry. One moment. Sorry, my wife didn't realize I was doing something. Okay. So she's like, there was probably a lot of background noise there. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay.
No, I'll cut it out.
Okay, you wanna start over with that last question?
Yeah, so Infamous have made 2 changes this DPC. They've replaced Mandy and Mr. Jeans with new players. How are they looking this time around?
Yeah, I think they're so much better this time around. Their mid player, KXY, he's fitting in very well. He showed a lot of promise, I think, in the match. I think these guys are much better this time around. So we'll see a lot of stuff from them, a lot of waves. There could be some upsets possibly coming up. But at the moment, having seen the teams played right now, I would say Infamous sitting about 4th, right behind No Ping.
Okay. And let's go briefly into Thunder Predator. I think a lot of people will be now more familiar with them than they were last season, having watched them at the major. In this series against Infamous, they're kind of playing a similar style. Is it that kind of fast, aggressive, quite loose style we saw them at the major, or are they more composed here playing against other teams from their region?
I think they feel more composed. They feel like it doesn't matter what heroes they get, as long as they get heroes that their players like to play, they can still win the games. And that's what we kind of saw in game 2 especially. I feel like they had an inferior draft and they were really far behind, but they played the split push game well. They delayed the game according to when they believed that they could, take engagements and win fights. And once they got to that point, it just felt like they completely outplayed Infamous. So on a macro level, I think Thunder Predator has improved tremendously ever since the major.
It's good to hear. And what sort of hero picks are we seeing them play? Because looking through I didn't get to watch much South American DPC this week, I'll admit.
Yeah.
But looking through the heroes that have been picked in all these games, it looks pretty different to what I've been seeing in the other regions. Would you say that's true? What's the regional meta here?
Yeah, definitely. I feel heroes who can fight are being more popular, especially in South American DPC. I think Centaur has had a lot of success. Bloodseeker, Carry, not offlane that much, but Carry Bloodseeker has seen a lot of success in this region. We're starting to see Tiny Carry a little bit more. That's something Thunder Predator picked. That's different to what they were playing at the major already. But for the most part, I want to say 60 to 70% of the heroes are about the same as what these teams were playing before, and the strategies are very similar, mainly because it's just a fresh patch right now. So you just got to give them a little bit more time, and by week 3, I would say everything's going to look completely different.
Great. Let's go into the other series from that day that you mentioned, the two new boys of upper division, Infinity Esports versus Hokori, which Infinity ended up taking 2-1. Let's talk a little through these teams. People might not have watched them before. How did they end up setting out?
They look good. I think Mr. Jeans, that's someone that a lot of the people thought, could be good going into season 2 here. He didn't really make too many waves in season 1, even though a lot of people were looking forward to him playing. In this series, I wouldn't say that he played that well. Maybe he's still a bit shaky and settling in with a new team. But Infinity, they did look much better, especially in game number 3. PP, their mid player, this guy is incredible, especially on his Invoker. He single-handedly carried that last game. And this is a player that I feel like in the future, maybe it could be with Infinity, but maybe with another team, it's going to make some big moves and is going to be one of the best mid players of the region.
Do you think he's progressed since, because he was in the lower division last season, of course, going through? Do you think he's built on his game? Because you watched quite a lot of lower division last season, didn't you?
Definitely. I casted every single game of the lower division. PP, and there's another player, Mini. These are the two guys that I thought were incredibly good from the lower division. And he's just exceeding expectations right now. That's the purpose of DPC, right? You want these players to develop, and PP is the perfect example of that. And now he's in Division 1 and he's already winning games. So it's really nice to see that.
Great to see. I want to go back into Beast Coast, who unfortunately we didn't get to see in the major, and I think a lot of people might have expected them to do incredibly well, considering how well Thunder Predator did. They've started off this season with pretty much a bang, beating Unknown and Hokori 2-0 both times. How do you think they looked?
They look good. I think their drafts are good. Maybe their play could use a little bit more work, even though it's Beast Coast. They just kind of a bit rusty, just like season 1, especially in the first week or so. But as they progress, it's going to get harder for the other teams to stand up to them. If you're like Thunder Predator or No Ping, for example, who I think are number 2 and number 3, you want to play Beast Coast early in the season. You don't want to play them late in the season when they're already warmed up. Yeah. But yeah, even against Unknown, game 2, Unknown looked really strong and they were dominating the map. And then Beast Coast, it just felt like Unknown couldn't do anything. Sorry, game 1, Unknown looked really strong. They were really far ahead and it looked like they were going to win the game. And then Beast Coast just kept ratting. And then at some point I felt like, hold on, Unknown are up 20 kills, but I don't feel like they're going to win this game. And they lost right after that.
Great. And also Beast Coast, they've stuck with the same 5-man lineup, which is not surprising considering they dominated the first season. I think a lot of people might have expected a change following the reason they couldn't attend the major. Are you pleased to see that lineup stick together? Do you think there's a lot of talent in it, or could they perhaps, are there any upgrades they could have even made?
I don't think so. I think this lineup is perfect. Maybe the only thing they can upgrade is their mentality in terms of how much practice they're doing, giving the effort and putting in the effort and the motivation, because that's what kind of happens when you keep the same roster. Maybe the motivation is a bit low, but what it does do when you keep the same roster is everybody understands their teammates' flaws and strengths, so you can adapt to those things and you can change your own gameplay to benefit your team. And that's why this team works. K1 is a very special player in how he plays, but his support duos, how they play, is why K1 is able to play the way he is. If they change roster, if they change to another player, now this new piece needs to learn how to adapt to this team environment and how they play, and it's just going to be too much effort and work at that point.
And in your experience as a player, they're obviously a roster that didn't attend a big major, so they didn't maybe have the slight amount of momentum. Though you mentioned that it might take them a while to get warmed up. Do you think it's going to have a big impact on the way they play? That kind of maybe that hit they took emotionally as a squad.
Oh, definitely, it's gonna hurt them, especially if there's any losses that they might occur in this DPC season. Maybe they could spiral downwards because of that. All that stuff is always going to be at the back of your mind. But as long as you're winning, everybody's going to be happy, and you get to the next major. We can call it a wash after that.
Let's go then briefly into the lower division. As before, you're casting all the lower division stuff, so you're watching a lot of it. Are there any particular players and teams that we should be looking out for this time in the lower division?
There was a team that we thought could be really good. It was Omega, but what happened was in game 1 they did really well. They were owning, and then game 2 and game 3 they kind of just dropped the ball. Latam defenders just kind of came back and dominated those games, and I feel like when you start the tournament that way, it kind of sets like a bad precedence. I think is that what I'm looking for?
Precedent,
and it kind of sucks for them because this is the kind of team that has a lot of talent, a lot of high MMR players, and if they could have just got that first win under their belt, then they could have just snowballed through this Division 2. Other teams I'm looking at is Binomistas. I thought they were going to do really well too, but they started off with a loss. But then the other day against against Gorilla Pride, they showed that they're that team that just starting off slow, and they came really close into getting to Division 1 as well.
Both the teams that went down, so Ego Boys and Latam Defenders, who I believe both have made changes, they've won their games. Would they be your favourites to go back up, or are there other teams here that you think could pass them?
The teams right now are way too close in terms of skill and how they function as a team that you can't really say okay, this team is surely gonna go. Every game right now is extremely important, and the team that wins early on is going to have that momentum, and I think that's what we need to be looking at. So by week number 2, we'll have a better idea of who will be possibly going back into Division 1. But as of right now, I would say 6 or 7 of these teams, they look very close. Yeah.
Okay, great. Lots to look forward to then. Let's move on to what we've got coming up next week in the upper division. Week 2, we've got Unknown versus TP on April 21st, and Takoro versus No Ping. April 23rd, Infamous versus Unknown, Beast Coast versus Infinity, and on the 24th, SG versus Thunder Predator. For me, that last series would be the pick of the week, but do you have a different pick?
Yeah, Unknown versus Thunder Predator. I think Unknown is a better team than SG at the moment in terms of individual skill and how they looked watching week 1. So I would put Thunder Predator versus Unknown a little bit higher. So you definitely want to be watching that one. And then if Thunder Predator is able to win that series convincingly, then I think against SG it should be very similar as well. And then we're going to see Thunder Predator get the ball rolling. Infinity versus Beast Coast, that's always nice to watch. It's Beast Coast. You're always seeing when are these guys going to lose? And it's possible also against Infinity. These guys are definitely the underdogs, but they got a lot of fight in them.
Great. Good to hear. Looking forward to it then. Okay, so thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you to 1437 for taking us through South America. He can be followed at 1437X on Twitter and is casting all of the South American DPC as well as playing in the North American lower divisions. So lots of 1437 opportunities at the moment to watch. We're going to be moving on to our final region, which is Neff taking us through North America. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through, I guess, what you see as the biggest games of the first week of the North American DPC.
I got to say, the biggest game this week was actually the lower division matches. I'm not sure if you caught it. Division 2 Hustlers, I forget because they changed their name a dozen times. Originally Open Qualifier Hustlers, then Closed Qualifier Hustlers, now Division 2 Hustlers. Their match against Wind and Rain. We got to see Divai Lama pull what I thought were the funnest and most high-skill players of the tournament playing around cliffs with his Magnus, putting the enemies on top of him, baiting enemies into attacking him. I'm not sure if you got to catch the games.
I did. I should have though, because they're as it's great to see them doing well, because that involves DPC Show South American host 1437. So it's nice to see him do well.
We had Frogo standing in for that match because 1437, I believe, had already agreed to do cast the South American DPC. He probably just entered the tournament, didn't know that he was going to win, got through, won, and then had that obligation. I've been told by the captain of the team, Pandago, in the interview that he won't be missing any more matches and that they've scheduled around it in the future. So any 1437 fans has that to look forward to. As far as other matches go, we got to see EG come back for the first time since the major. Undying had a solid performance. I bet a lot of people have been missing them. They looked very good. Quincy Crew as well, which has me very excited. I mean, I told you at the end of the the end of the DPC show podcast last time that North America would end up in first place and second place respectively. I was half right, which I imagine my prediction was better than everyone else's because of that.
It was close to it, yeah. I think some people might have said that EG would... My prediction wasn't bad, actually. I think I had Secret first and EG third. No, I didn't. I was nowhere near that. I had VP somewhere. So I'm retroactively declaring myself a god.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, I didn't have EG for first place. I thought they'd be second and Quincy Crew first. Arteezy is, after all, cursed, as we all saw.
Yes, very much so. But let's go first into that Four Zoomers game that kicked off the week. Four Zoomers versus Pent Ace, if that's what they are now called.
Yes.
Which is the old Sad Boys stack, pretty much, plus Seafreak and Monster and Rayora.
Correct.
There's a number of different changes to that stack. Talk me through what ended up happening there and how that new team looks.
Those matches, game number one, pretty one-sided, and I think a lot of that has to do with maybe them understanding the meta and the new patch a little bit better on the side of Four Zoomers. Brack seems to be an excellent captain. Game number one, incredibly tanky heroes they ran with a Warlock behind them. They just didn't have enough damage on hit days to be able to tear through them. 20 minutes ends up rolling around. Warlock has this new Aghanim Shard, AoE heal. If you don't have enough damage to deal with them, if you don't have healing reduction, you just end up getting torn apart, and that's what happened in game number one. Game number two, they just weren't able to close that high ground on the side of Pentace, and I think that they just need more time to just practice, scrim with each other, play against some other teams to get used to the patch. Not really what we're used to seeing from superstars like Fear.
I want to talk a little bit about Four Zoomers, because they are the team that maybe disappointed the most in the first series of the NA DPC. I don't know if we necessarily could have expected them to hit in that top two, but we might have expected them to make somewhat more of a run of it. Do you think they're showing more this time, or do we have to wait till they play the kind of the big three of the NA DPC?
I would say that they're showing a little bit more promise. I don't think they were expecting Undying to come out of nowhere and be as strong as they were. I don't think anybody was expecting Undying to take games off of Quincy Crew and then almost force a tiebreaker into the major, a three-way tie in North America. Four Zoomers probably took that as a bit of an insult. Jenkins put it well one way on cast, saying, who are these guys Undying to come out of nowhere? We were sitting near the top of North America before you showed up. So I think they've redoubled their efforts. Everybody on that team plays a huge number of pubs. I think more than people on the other squads, I would say. I've started watching a couple of their streams, all very nice guys, and they're all hungry and young as well, other than Brax. He's old and tired, but experienced.
Old and full.
Yeah.
They are a nice bunch of boys. I've interviewed Brax, Husky, and also Gunner. I'm a big fan of Gunners, so it would be nice to see them do well.
Looking very strong, though, and pioneering that Beastmaster a little bit faster than everybody else. I'm sure the other regions have already talked about with you.
Yes, people have picked it up on it. Actually, it's not come up too much, the Beastmaster, but so far.
Really?
Because I think it reached prominence midway through the week. So we're not spoken much about it, actually. But good to hear. Let's go into Undying then, who 2-0'd the cut. Undying, I think, were as you said, the surprise package for a lot of people last time round. I think they're a really exciting team. Are they going to continue to be a really exciting team this time, do you think?
I think so, yeah. They were a little bit disappointed with the results in last season. I heard that they were originally going to do a boot camp. They opted out of it towards the end, though. I think the only team doing one inside North America is EG. It gives them a little bit of an edge over the other teams. But But Undying, I imagine they're going to be pretty strong. It's not as much of a surprise factor as it was in the previous season. I imagine people know how strong this team is, and so they'll give them a little bit more time to do prep work and do prep work and expect the unexpected.
And how did they look? Was it more because last time it was they were an aggressive team. They were very, very fast. They played quick. They played interesting, fast Dota. I said they were fast 3 times there, but they were.
They were fast, and it's funny that you bring that up. I was going over their games one more time before we started, and the cut actually chose to go Naga Siren against Undying, which is a bit of a surprise to me. Very slow-paced hero, and Undying punished them very heavy for it. So the other teams are going to do their research. If you don't, you end up getting run over. I think you saw probably some of those Knoxville stats towards the start of the season. They were, I think, the 2nd or 3rd fastest team overall in the DPC, which is just absolutely insane.
I'd like to talk next about Black and Yellow and Simply 2-based. Black and Yellow have Eternal Envy playing for them, and Simply 2-based is Monkeys, I Annihilate, Flea. All good players. Black and Yellow didn't end up winning. Is it not going to be an Eternal Envy series this time? How's he looking on that carry position?
Eternal Envy is looking a lot better. When he won the Summit 13 online a number of months ago, he actually wasn't putting that much time into practice. It was a lot of the time Brax carrying that team on his shoulders and scrims and games as far as shot calling goes. I think he's taking things more seriously again. He might have been a little bit burnt out before. Now, it feels like there's some issues with the team. I think Envy jumped on board. He took whatever upper division team would be willing to take him at the time. You know, he is a superstar player, so a lot of people would be willing to grab him. But they have some things that they need to work out before they look that strong. Right now, I would rate them probably 6 overall in the league until they change my mind.
And what were those teams doing? What led to a Simply based win there? What was it? Just a weakness from Black and Yellow, or the particular picks? Anything interesting coming out?
I'd say game number 1, Envy being Envy, a little bit out of position at times. It looked a little bit awkward. I think game number 2, they ended up doing quite well for themselves, but that was more of an outdraft. I'd say Simply 2-based, they're just playing higher skilled Dota. They didn't play around their time in game number 2. Anti-Mage, who I think is a little bit of a weak hero still. But yeah, I'd say it was just classic Envy getting caught out of position here and there.
Let's
being a
close
little
up
bit
then by
underfarmed.
talking about Quincy. I was watching you watch them very quickly in the last couple of games. They seemed are pretty strong. How did you feel about their return to the league?
Quincy, I do look incredibly strong, yes, but we don't really have enough of a sample size to say where they stand. Simply 2-based, yes, they are a pretty strong team, but they saw a number of roster changes between season 1 and 2. I'd say that they're a lot weaker without Z-Freak on the roster than they were before. Flea is no joke, don't get me wrong, but it's not really the same as it was before.
What sort of things were they picking? Anything interesting from Quincy?
Just the same thing that everyone else was doing, picking a whole lot of Warlock. Lower division team picked that one up a little bit slower. Actually went ahead and counted how many Warlocks I saw in each division. It was 7 out of the 11 games in the upper division. And in the lower division, 3 out of 11 games, all towards 3 of the last 4 games that were played, which is a little bit surprising. He said people didn't really pick up on the Beastmaster that fast, and said like halfway through the week, the lower division teams just seem to be copying the upper division inside their own region. But yeah, Warlock for sure is one of the strongest things. People picking that up with the Grimstroke is just terrifying with that double fatal bonds as well. Quincy Crew obviously doing their research as far as drafts and whatnot goes. So hopefully they ban out in the future.
Good to hear, a scary one. Let's move on to the next week then, what people can look forward to coming up. We've got not quite a barnstorming week yet, but there's still some good games to come. We've got Four Zoomers versus The Cut on the 20th. On the 22nd, we've got EG versus Pentace and Undying versus Simply 2-based. And closing up the week on the 25th, we've got Quincy Crew versus Black and Yellow and Undying versus Four Zoomers. I'd say Undying Zoomers would be my pick of the week there. Do you have anything else you'd like to highlight?
That Undying Zoomers game looks very good. EG Penta Ace, I'd be a little bit more hyped for. PPD was still on the Penta Ace Sad Boy squad. I think the man has a a great mind for picking apart teams like EG. Without his leadership there, I don't think they're as strong. I'm interested in seeing how the cut performs against Four Zoomers, because these are both these are some classic NA boys teams, both of them. Four Zoomers had a bunch of people who rose up through the ranks the last year or so in the cut. I feel like they're kind of Four Zoomers V2. So I don't imagine they'll win that game, but it's a pretty hype match for anybody who's been following the NA scene for the last little while before the DPC rolled around. But highlight of the week, definitely, like you said, Undying versus Four Zoomers. That is bound to be a good one. I'm not sure who's going to come out on top there. I want to say Zoomers is going to be taking this game very seriously to prove themselves and put themselves back in that second, third position overall in the region. So again, I'm very excited for that match. You guys should all watch it. April 25th.
Excellent. Well, let's all look forward to that then. Thanks so much for joining me for this week, and I'll see you around. And that's a wrap. So thanks to everybody who's watched the whole way through this. It's massively appreciated. Again, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Danieloffen, and that's spelled Daniel, then O-F-F-E-N. You can follow all of our panelists on Twitter. Of course, you can follow Danog at Danog, and you can follow Peksu at Peksu Dota, Mo Farah at Mo Farah Dota, Kips at Kipsol, 1437 at 1437X, and Neff at Neff Sensei. They are all fantastic people and are well worthy of your patronage. Next week, we're going to be returning, of course, at the usual time, probably slightly earlier. If you would like to watch my other podcast, which can be found on all good podcast platforms under Position 6 Podcast, got lots of episodes there. I've got my 100th episode coming up this week, which is going to be either with Kyle or with Seb, depending on whether Seb gets back to me with a time in the next couple of days. But either way, that's going to be a barnstorming episode, so check that out and follow me on Twitter at Danieloffen to get updates. If you enjoyed this show and you would like to financially support me for creating it, you can find a link to my Patreon in the episode description, and I do really appreciate whatever support I get there. But no worries if not. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.